WBNE.
Hello and welcome to episode 145, all about the Silmarillion, Chapter 6, of Fëanor and the Unchaining of Melkor, being the 145th part of That's What I'm Talking About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, and right now I am reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. Today I am joined by Bayana and Delia of Black Girls Create. Oh, my voice cracked on that. That was nice. Black Girls Create. Welcome back, guys.
Hey.
That was in sync.
It was.
So, funny story. I was like, I'm gonna, not that I don't love having them on, but I've had them on a lot. I'm probably annoying them. I'm gonna, I'll give it a rest. I don't want to bug them too much. And then, a couple weeks ago, Delia slid into my DMs and was like, hey, so I see with the two eyes emojis, which is it's my favorite emoji ever. Oh, just the eyes being like, so we see you're doing the Silmarillion. And I was like, oh my God, perfect. I was worried if I reached out to you again, you would be like, literally shut up. I'm blocking you. So.
Absolutely not. We were so excited. We knew you were about to do the Silmarillion, obviously, but we happened to be reading it in our community, as a group read. And for both of us, it was our first time reading it. I had studied it for our Patreon podcast, Tolkien Black Girls, but I hadn't actually read the actual book of it. And so I didn't know, we probably won't even be done by the time she's already fully in. So it's fine. But then we finished, and then I saw you post. I don't even know what I saw the account post. But I was like, wait, hold on. She's properly just started. Hold on. We gotta make this happen because truly, no spoilers, but it was such an enjoyable experience. And we are very much still in the headspace of wanting to shout about it. So
yeah,
let's.
Yeah, I think we were in a meeting on Zoom together, and it was wait a second, but we could just, because we don't have a space really, we can yell about it with folks in our community, but we're not really talking about it. So it's just but wait, I want to talk about it. Yeah,
it's just an echo chamber, or it's just yeah.
We get some jokes off on Twitter and stuff like that, but yeah, we just need to properly, officially yell about it.
Okay, well, great. Welcome. We're here to yell about it. I'm glad to hear that you guys enjoyed your experience of the Silmarillion, because this is such a different experience of reaching out to people, finding guests and reaching out to people, because doing Lord of the Rings and doing The Hobbit is one thing, but figuring out, and also it's a blur of the guests that I've already had on being wait, did they say that they were into the Silmarillion, or have they read it, or were they oh, I attempted it and I fell asleep 5 times, and and so it's definitely a lot harder to find guests who are interested in the Silmarillion and want to talk about it and have fun with it, but also I don't want it to just be two people, because I'm supposed to be the clueless one, so it can't be and maybe there will still be some episodes where I get someone on who is also reading it for the first time or something, but it probably wouldn't be a fun chapter for 2 people to be yeah, I don't know how that's pronounced. I think it's so it's the Ainur, but when I was first reading it, I was the Ayanur. How gross is that? And I'm sure there are still so many things that I've said incorrectly. And so anyway, long story short, I'm glad that you guys had a positive experience with the Silmarillion.
Yeah, it it didn't take me a second, because we also did, I wasn't I tried to get through Lord of the Rings. I might have said this before, I don't know, but I tried to get through Lord of the Rings on my own at least 3 times. And then when we did a group read in our community a couple years ago, I finally was able to get through it. So part of it was that there was only a certain amount we had to read a week, and so that made it easier to process. And then also because it did take me a second to get back into the Tolkien of it all, where it's 14 different names for every person, and also plant and mountain. And so like, that part was like, okay, great. Okay, I'm back in. But then once like I got used to that again, like it's so much fun. It's so messy. I think that's what it is. Like I love mess. So that was really
the drama of it all, which, you know, you're still on the journey, but like Tolkien can write some drama and it's a good time.
Yeah, and like the drama is picking up in this chapter.
It sure is.
You know, where and like I'll walk you through the like mental journey I went through just reading. So this was a really short chapter. For some reason I thought this chapter was like 15 pages or something, and then I kind of like really begrudgingly sat down to read it last night and was like, okay, I guess I better start this really. And I was like, oh, it's 4 pages. Never mind. I got this. But I like went on a journey of being like, who is this dude? Do we like him? Is he? Who is he? What is he? What's going to happen here? And then slowly being like, okay, I think I see maybe where I actually, that's a lie. I don't see where this is going, but like.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
How it's going, I guess.
Right.
You know? So
you get the vibes, maybe. Like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I want to bring up one of my patrons commented on a post that I did. By the way, listeners, if you want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod. And you can access these things too. Yay. Okay. Anyway, there's the plug. Bill Woods commented on something and said he appreciates that I'm just doing the Silmarillion one chapter at a time. And so, yes, this is a short chapter. I did combine I think it was chapter 4 is literally 1.5 pages. And so I did combine that. But I am doing this one chapter at a time because even though this is 4 pages, I guarantee we will talk a lot about it.
I promise.
Like a lot to talk about still. But anyway, Bill said, I'm reminded of the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? Answer, 1 bite at a time.
That's interesting. Very true in this case.
I think that's a perfect like metaphor of the Silmarillion is we're just taking it 1 step at a time. Unless, of course, the chapter is 1 page and then we'll take it 2 steps at a time. But
we'll be bold.
We'll get there.
It's so dense. I'm sure your listeners have caught on thus far. But yeah, that's the thing about the Silmarillion. While I did very much enjoy it, and even if I wasn't, like, I feel, for me, I enjoyed it more than I would even say, is this controversial than Lord of the Rings? Oh my gosh.
I think that is very, I mean, not controversial, but like, I don't know, uncommon. Cause I have heard people say, oh, I loved reading the Silmarillion more than Lord of the Rings. I definitely find it more difficult. Like,
it is very dense. That's the thing, though.
Yeah.
I have to focus all 2 of my brain cells with all of my intensity while I'm reading this, you know?
But I think I agree with you, Delia. But I also think part of that is because, like, with Lord of the Rings, I've read, you know, like, seen the movies and, like, done all of that beforehand. So, like, while it made it easier because I kind of knew what to, how, like, where it was going loosely, it was harder for me to just be, like, I don't know, to just, like, get into, like, the text. It was so dense, and I was just like, but I could just go watch it again and then it would be more enjoyable, whereas like this, it's like there's nothing to compare it to, so it's just like, wow, this is a lot. Also, I don't think, again, like I said, I love mess. I don't like Lord of the Rings is like great, just like emotional, and you know, there's so many like things there, but it's not messy in the same way. So I think that's also it. I'm like sitting here like reading the Silmarillion with like my popcorn, like, what's happening next?
Right. I agree.
That got me thinking, I think the messiest part of Lord of the Rings is everything involved with Denethor. And that's one of my favorite parts of the story because it's just so extra and dramatic. And I don't know, I'm just like connecting those dots of like everything that goes down with Denethor, and just like he set himself on fire. Oh, this will be a good plug. I was on the One Does Not Simply podcast, and we talked about the Pyre of Denethor chapter, and it's just like, I love, like, he's a terrible person, obviously, but like I love the drama that he brings to the story. Okay, so now speaking of drama, I guess let's get into it.
Let's just jump right into it.
And I think we're kind of, this chapter is really just like the tip of the iceberg.
Oh boy.
I can see it I mean, obviously I say that was like a really dumb thing for me to say, because
no, like
in one hand I have 50 pages and in my right hand I have so many more pages. Like I still have like 200 more pages, you know. So, but like, it's obviously like, this is the tip of the iceberg.
So true. I think what people, and like this isn't spoilers, like what people like so much about the Silmarillion, Tolkien's world, is how everything feeds into the next thing. So like it's very true that like you're at the tip of the iceberg, and like this is, you can even tell it's setting up to like for whatever is to come. Like it's just a very clear. It's so interesting how Tolkien can write so densely, and it can be so densely packed, but even still you can clearly see the through line like that is being like laid, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he says there's like moments too where he'll be like, oh, the events of this thing that I haven't told you about yet, but it's coming. Mm-hmm. Like he does that a couple times in this one too, and you're just like, wait, what is that?
Yeah, what's that? What is that hinting to? What happened there? What? Like, okay, I guess we'll get into it. So this is a Fëanor?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how y'all say it?
Yeah, that's how I say it, Fëanor.
Okay,
yeah,
great. Bayana looks unsure. Unwilling to comment on.
I don't know that I've said his name out loud, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, real quick, pro tip. When we were reading it, I straight up, there were times where like if the reading was particularly dense, I would read it out loud, which helped me get used to like the names, but also
I do
like,
it all the time. Yeah,
helped like really get it to like stick.
Oh, 100%. And like I'm not exaggerating when I say I am reading the Silmarillion like it is one of my textbooks from a college class, where I'm paying attention to like, okay, who are the names and like what are the key characteristics here, and like I'm highlighting like, okay, he was the strongest of skilled of hand and he discovered gems, and like what are the highlights and the important parts in this thing. And then there are some pages where it's like all of my blue highlighter. I just like highlighted so many things. Anyway, yes, this is of Fëanor, and spoiler alert, the Unchaining of Melkor, which I feel like Tolkien, he did that a couple chapters ago too, where it was like of something and the captivity of Melkor.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen until like the end of the chapter, and I was like, oh, that could have been a fun little surprise. Like we could have just, you know, of Fëanor. But I guess he was like, but it's also about the Unchaining of Melkor, and that would be I would be lying to my readers if I just said of Fëanor. All of the elves, after like I think it was like 4 chapters describing their journey to their various journeys to Valinor. They're here finally. Like they're there.
Living it up.
Everyone's having a good time. It is the noontide of the blessed realm, or I guess blessed realm if we're talking old-timey language. The fullness of its glory and its bliss, long in tale of years, but in memory too brief. So basically this is, I'm getting calm before the storm. This is like the last time everything was good and peaceful.
Yeah,
probably. Yeah.
You're not. I would say that's a good summary of that sentence. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, they're inventing and discovering things. They are inventing the concept of like documenting things, both in speech and song, as well as engraving things in stone and writing with it just says with brush or with pen. So I guess they went like, I don't know why in my mind, like a pen seems like a very advanced form of technology. Mm-hmm. Compared to like, it's like, oh yeah, we're chiseling these words into stone, and then meanwhile someone's over here with like a fountain, like ballpoint.
I was gonna say with a bic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like the Muggles and the Muggleborns in Hogwarts, and they're looking around. All these other kids have quills, and they're like,
y'all, we can just. Do y'all not know? Okay.
But anyway, yeah, times are prospering very much. I would say probably like the Renaissance is going on. And we already know from I think it was the previous chapter, we went into the line of Finwë and his 3 sons, and then his sons' gajillion sons. And
we love a family tree. Just gotta pause the story to break it down real quick.
Yeah. And we gotta name drop Galadriel, because Tolkien's like,
fun.
The readers gotta know that this does relate. Remember those hobbits? It does tie back. I promise.
In case you were reading this, like, where are the hobbits? Well, they're not here, but Galadriel is, so just stay with it.
I think I've already made this reference before, but this just feels so much like How I Met Your Mother, how Ted is sitting down telling his kids about how he met their mother, but it's just taking the longest time ever. And so, like, I can just see Tolkien being like, okay, yeah, there's a story about these hobbits who destroy a ring and save the world, but it all began long ago. There was nothing, and there was this god named Eru Ilúvatar, and he liked music. And everyone else being like, okay, so where do the hobbits come in? And he's like, oh, not for like another 3 ages.
But just stay with me. It's like, well, I've got places to be. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm here. It's fine.
But this chapter is specifically about Finwë's eldest son, Fëanor, who Coru Finwë was his name. By his mother, he was called Fëanor, Spirit of Fire. Thus, he is remembered in all the tales of the Noldor. So already we got elves with multiple names.
I've honestly, like, because rereading this, I was like, oh, I forgot that wasn't his birth name. Like, I just never thought about it again, which is why I am, like, very much an advocate for just giving all these people one names. Like, why are we doing this? I'm not going to remember it. I don't actually care that much if it's not going to come up again.
And that should have been more. I'm the type of person, like, I like to know it, but clearly, I just feel like this should have been more content for the appendices. Like, you do not need to put this in the text.
Right.
Yes.
And I feel like there are some characters who get called multiple names.
Right.
At different points. And so then it's like, okay, cool. Like, I know what you're talking about. But in this case, that was the second time I've seen that name.
Yeah, it's very much like, I mean, granted, Tolkien was an author of a totally different age. But, like, nowadays, we would be like, if it's not important to the story or the plot or, like, characterization, then don't include it. You know, like, you're just, like, taking up space on a page, you know? I think of it like, they say for musicals, a song should either advance the plot or, like, advance a character or their motivation or like tell or introduce you to a character. And if it doesn't do either of those things, then you should cut the song. I feel like that's just all of Tolkien's writing. But that also, like, that's what makes Tolkien. He wouldn't be that dude without these random details that
100%.
Add nothing except for, like, hey, these elves have a culture where they're given a name at birth, but their mother gives them a name later on, and they might go by a different name or something. So Miriel is his mother, who was called Sirinte, another name, and she and Finwë are like true loves, amazing, love to see it, beautiful. But in the bearing of her son, Miriel was consumed in spirit and body. And after his birth, she yearned for release from the labor of living. And she said to Finwë, "Never again shall I bear child, for strength that would have nourished the life of many has gone forth into Fëanor." I feel like there's just a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
I feel like, can you imagine being born and then your mom being like, "I want to die now."
Like, that was too much. I'm over it, actually.
Yeah. And second of all, kind of just sounds like she has postpartum depression. Let's get her on some Zoloft or something, you know?
Which apparently, and if they don't have it in Valinor, then there's really no hope for the rest of Middle-earth.
But I also kind of, like, in this case, like, they're not acquainted with, like,
sadness at all.
They're elves.
You're right.
They're like, we're not sadness, death. They're just like, we just got here.
We don't know her.
We supposed to just stay here, so we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And even like the Valar too, they're like, I don't know, we just
everything's been great so far. I don't know why are you sad? Like, it's great here.
Right. Manwe is throwing one eternal party, so it's like
he loves himself a good party.
So yeah. So it's just it's interesting because it feels like, if I can remember, sort of like she's like the first one who's suddenly like, you know what? I'm not about this.
Honestly, I respect the idea of like, defining what happiness means for you. Like, y'all are all cool in Valinor, but honestly, I just gave birth to this child who was a lot. Like, I can already tell that his energy is too much.
Absorbed all of my being, and I have no more life to give to other children. So bye. I am done.
I did what I came here to do.
Also, just like trying not to obviously read too much into it, but just like what a trope of like mothers.
Okay, let's talk about that. Yes.
Oh my god, literally.
Wow.
All you said was okay, but that was so loaded. Just like this very common trope of mothers dying for their children. And I mean, like, obviously that's something that is very true to life, I think, but also I think like any parent would die for the children. But like, anyway, this trope of like a female character who, like, she's described really positively. She is skilled in weaving and needlework. Her hands were more skilled to fineness than any hands, even among the Noldor. And so, like, they're having a great life, and she clearly has a lot of life within her if she passed it all on to Fëanor. And I don't know what he does, but he goes on to do something. But, like, that like sacrificing of a female character to give way for a male character, and could also potentially lead to, like, quote unquote, like a villain origin story, so
it's just really unfortunate. Like, I'm sure you've talked about, I mean, it's like, okay, whoa, not to get that deep. I was like, it's reflective in fandom too, but let's hold on, let's back it up. But like, it's just the woman representation in Tolkien is just not giving what needs to be gave, which of course it's of the time, but also it's like we're into the Silmarillion, it's like, all right, cool, let's see what's popping over here, and then it's like, oh yeah, she gave birth and died, so
yeah. And I will say, I don't think I've talked about it yet, but like, I'm 50 pages into the Silmarillion, and already there are more female characters than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit combined. So like, we're doing great. In that
and even
sense.
Then though, I think it's possible though that like percentage wise it might be the same. There are like a lot of characters in the Silmarillion.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So it might be like still.
I see what you mean. And like, again, too, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here. I'm just trying to like think of points that people would bring up to like argue against this. That like we do have very prominent female characters doing like worthy things, like Varda, who like brought out the stars so the children of Iluvatar could be born, and the elves came. And I don't remember anyone else, so just her. No,
didn't Yavanna is the one who
Yavanna,
like,
yes,
raised all the like forests and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Yavanna is real dope.
And then
Nienna, I mean, I don't remember specifically all the Valar that he like describes, but like I do remember Nienna, like the way that he described like her place in like death kind of being really beautiful, and like like having the power to like give grace and wisdom and mercy in that process is really interesting. But like, all that being said, the female characters that he created all have, like, I would say, stereotypical female, motherly nature to it of like taking care of things or being graceful and beautiful and calm. Even though they are powerful, we don't see someone like Olmo who like
right, exactly,
moves seas and, you know, all this stuff, you know.
It feels like often when, and with the exception of some of the Valar, like it feels like when women are doing things, it's in these very stereotypical roles. But I will say, like, Yavanna, Nienna, even Vard are, like, some of my favorite, like, I don't know, characters in lore. I don't even know what you want to call it. Like, I just, reading about them was such, like, total, like, I was like, man, this is so cool. Like, it's partly why I enjoyed the Silmarillion, like, just from jump immediately. I was like, Tolkien could have been doing this whole time. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Did you meet Melian
Yeah,
yet?
That was chapter 4, I think.
I can't remember, like, the order. She's, she's also dope.
Oh, right,
also
she's
like,
the one. Again, another very stereotypical female role.
But yeah, but also, like...
She kind of has, like, almost like a siren role where, like, her voice... It's not evil or anything, but, like, her voice puts... I forget the name of the elf, but puts him in a trance, and he forsakes his people.
Yeah, he's like, I
found this
done.
Really hot chick in the woods. Like,
I don't know who y'all talk about. You said, I never heard of that.
Literally, how I take it is, I'm like, this is just proof to me that the women really are like kind of running like Middle Earth, and the guys are just
are the all powerful people. Like, had it not been for Varda, the elves would not have come. You know?
And it's interesting, too, because it feels like they take a back seat, but I think it's also just from, like, Tolkien's perspective and the way that he's writing it. So it's often, like, Manwe did this. Owlay's over here, like...
making dwarves.
Out here. It's like, just making things just cuz, and, like, you know, like, he's talking about all of these different characters, and, like, I don't know. It just kind of, like, feels like like, the women are quieter, but like you can kind of still feel their hands and things, and they're still, you know, like they're doing, like you said, like Varda, like they're doing the like really important stuff, and like I guess the men are doing the most.
Yeah.
And then like out of pocket sort of way. Yeah. So I think like again, this is not this chapter, but just touching on it, like that's a good example of like, it's like, okay, well, single is single and that's cool, but like, what does that mean about Melian then, that she like totally like got him together? And so I just wish we saw more of that, instead of when we do see them, it's usually like being active. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go die or like I'm gonna pine after a man, or pine after a man, he doesn't love me back, but then I find another man, which, you know, no offense to Fëanor, I'm just saying like that was literally like Éowyn's like storyline.
I know. Oh my god.
Anyway,
my sweet summer child. Both of them, both
I
her
love
and
Éowyn.
Faramir. God. Anyway, I'm gonna get like two. That's a whole separate podcast, literally. Anyway, yes. So Muriel is so weakened and like heartbroken, I guess, through the birth of Fëanor. I almost said Faramir. Of Fëanor. Finway's upset, but when he asks, this is kind of funny. He goes and asks Manwe for help, or Manwe, whatever, for help, and Manwe's like, I don't know, maybe go to Lorien. I guess that's the best. Try that. Other than that, I don't know, because we've never had this problem before. Like, maybe you shouldn't be not mortal, but like maybe you shouldn't be an earthly being. Like, that seems like your problem.
Have you tried not being an elf?
Yeah, like, have you tried?
It's worked for me, so
not having children, like,
right.
Anyway, so they go to Lorien, where Muriel. It sounds like I'm saying Muriel with a U,
like from
which is
Cowardly Dog,
an old lady name, you know. But it's with an I, Miriel. Maybe I'll say Miriel. That sounds better. And they get there and she's like, yeah, I'm real depressed and I'm real tired. Just let me go. And then she says, but hold me blameless in this and all that may come after. I appreciate that she kind of has the wisdom to be like, I can foresee at some point in the future someone being like, yeah, and Fëanor's mom gave birth to him, and then she died, and she abandoned him and Finwë and caused them pain and all this other stuff. And I can't speak to the and all that may come after because I don't know what's gonna come after. So I don't know if that's her like having premonitions the way that you guys are just like.
I saw Bayana's face. I was like,
no, it's funny because I didn't like catch that.
Right, same.
When I read it the first time. But like part of me is like, maybe she just had a vision and said, you know what, I'm out. Like maybe she said, I don't want no parts of this.
In hindsight, I'm like, oh, so she like, okay, I see what she was about. Like, okay, I see it. I see the vision now.
But anyway, yeah, she's like, I'm gonna go rest. I hope you won't blame me for what has happened here. And Finwë says goodbye to her, not thinking, I guess they're both thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to go here and I'm going to sleep and I'm going to rest and heal. But instead, she lays down to sleep in the gardens, and though she seemed to sleep, her spirit indeed departed from her body and passed in silence to the halls of Mandos. The maidens of Este tended to her body, which I think is kind of creepy, that like her body is just ever preserved in the gardens here, even though her like soul has left. Which I guess is what death is. I don't know why I phrased that like that, but whatever. That's kind of weird, but okay. Yeah, and then Finwë is real depressed about it, obviously, because this was like the love of his life. And
fair enough.
Yeah. And to his credit, and I say this, like he should care for his child, but like this is a story, and we could very easily go another like stereotypical route of like he hates Fëanor because he caused the love of his life to die. But he very much loves him and gives him all of his love and attention, and becomes his favorite, obviously. Fëanor, this is where I started being like, I'm a little suspicious of who the, like, I don't know who this guy is, but I wrote, I just don't know if Fëanor is going to be good, bad, chaotic. So yeah, just the nodding, because it says, few ever changed his courses by counsel, none by force. That sounds like not the kind of person that like you want to be a potential leader of these people, you know. So like in the future,
that does sound logical. Yeah.
Just the vague statements from y'all.
I gotta give content, but there's only so much.
It says the most subtle in mind. I don't know what that means. Does that just mean he's dumb? Or
I take it. That's an interesting point. I thought it was like, I guess maybe that is what that means. I just thought like, you know, he was so clever. Like you can't even see him move. Like you know, like
the most subtle and
that's interesting.
Yeah, maybe he's really cunning.
Yeah,
and
that's
crafty.
what I thought.
Maybe
but
that's
actually,
maybe
saying I'm like, maybe it does mean he's just unintelligent. I could see it that way too. Maybe that.
Yeah, with more context, I'm not.
Yeah, like it's not. I'm like, okay, I don't. You could. It depends. That's such a loaded question because I'm like, well, how does Tolkien view Fëanor? Is the real question. So I don't know. Right. Interesting.
Okay, we'll circle back to that. And he is most skilled in hands. It is he who discovered how gems greater and brighter than those of the earth might be made with skill.
See, that's smart.
So he is just
right.
Yeah. Or crafty. Yeah.
Maybe one of your listeners knows.
I'm picturing him not because he's. This could be really loaded, but I'm imagining him to be a Slytherin. already. You don't have to say anything, but
I'm just taking it in with what you know. Like, that's interesting.
Because, like, I don't know, just the subtle in mind. I'm really, like, thinking about that too hard. I'm going to move past it. Anyway, so yeah, he's figured out how to, because the Noldor have been, like, mining and finding gems, he discovers how to make them so they can manufacture ones that are even better. And it says, seldom were the hands and mind of Fëanor at rest. He marries Nerdinel.
I think
Nerdinel. But her name is it?
Probably.
Okay, that sounds bad, because all I can see is the nerd, and I'm like,
it does say nerd. Oh, what a nerd.
What a nerd. I'm just going to call her Nerd. So he marries Nerd, and they have 7 sons. Yeah, that's right. I'm remembering. And it says, she was firm of will, but more patient than Fëanor, desiring to understand minds rather than to master them. And at first she restrained him when the fire of his heart grew too hot. But his later deeds grieved her, and they became estranged. And that's when I was like, okay, so Fëanor, definitely something happens here. Something happens.
Something happens so apparently so bad that, like, we learn about his wife and immediately Tolkien's like, but don't worry about her because it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
She's over him.
And also the way that it's like, she's patient and she wants to understand people, and she tries to not fight Fëanor on these things, but because it also says she's stubborn, she's firm of will. But clearly, like, trying to talk some sense into him about whatever is going on, and him also being equally, if not more, stubborn. And so, of course, that's when you have 2, unmovable forces. I don't know what the end of that sentence is, because I don't remember what happens when you have 2 unmovable forces. Y'all, there's a reason I did not do well in AP Physics. So anyway, what happens when you have 2 unstoppable forces? Okay, but anyway, moving on again.
Well, I think I just want to say, I think it's interesting also because I was just going to make a, like, light joke of, like, 7 sons. That's too many kids. It's too many. But also thinking about, like, their relationship, I'm like, y'all had 7 sons, so y'all must have been agreeable at some point. So, like, that is a journey.
Yeah. This is true. I don't know, maybe it was just real passionate. Just
one of those, like,
just like angry
Game of Thrones-esque, like, we don't like each other, but, like, yeah, I see it.
But,
I see it.
And again, that's something, I mean, granted, there's still so much book left, but the way you guys are talking about her and their relationship leaves me that Tolkien does not go into it. And, like, that's something that would be so interesting to see, is to see like the wife's perspective on everything that's happening, and to see how she is in this relationship against this other personality, and how those dynamics are. And so that's disappointing, but not surprising.
Yeah.
That it's like not expanded on.
I think a lot can be gathered from how, when, like, in Tolkien in general, but especially in the Silmarillion, as, like, people are reading, like, if y'all are reading at home, when the women, like, are silent, or when they, like, pull themselves back from the narrative, like, those choices that they make are very interesting to read, because you're not going to get it in, like, active speech as much as you do with, like, the men of the story. But I think if you really analyze and, like, read with a close eye for those moments in the women characters, it's very telling and very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So now we jump back to Manwe. He is very depressed because he's like, well, I'm the leader, I'm the king, I have to have more children, I guess. And he has a second wife, Indis, and there, I feel like there are a lot of jokes I could make of, like, hey, like, who's up in this house? But I didn't come up with any. I was just too lazy, but I don't know. Anyway.
You were too in this story to think of any.
Yeah. just, it writes itself, whatever, food for thought. And she is of the fair elves. So she's, I guess, she's not marrying below her, but in my mind she is, because the Vanyar are, in my mind, really snooty, and they're the 1%.
I actually like that description.
Yeah. But she comes from a very like worthy people and class, essentially. And they do love or it just says Finwë loved her greatly, so we don't maybe she didn't love him. But he does care for her immensely, but Muriel's presence is still with him and still in his mind all the time. Of all whom he loved, Fëanor had ever the chief share of his thoughts. So Fëanor is his favorite because he's never going to get over the death of his first wife. Poor Indus.
Yeah.
Being like, second, this sucks. And it says the wedding of his father was not pleasing to Fëanor, and he did not like Indus, did not like Fingolfin or Finarfin, his half-brothers. So he kind of just does his own thing. He goes exploring in Aman, and he is expanding his knowledge and his skills. And it says, in those unhappy things which later came to pass, and in which Fëanor was the leader. And I was like, okay, so there we go. So he's not a good guy, I guess. We'll see.
He's a guy.
He's a guy. He's there.
He's a character that features in the Silmarillion.
Okay. That's so interesting. So cool. So yeah, so in what comes to pass, people later blame Finwë and think if he had just stayed depressed and alone after Muriel died, that what happened to Fëanor would not have built him to be who he became and did whatever things he does. I appreciate how vague Tolkien is and how he's just hinting at all this. In the unhappy things which later came to pass and like his later deeds that grieved her. Love the vagueness and just being like, don't worry.
The stuff that's coming, it's coming. Don't you worry. I will say, no spoilers, so listeners don't spoil it either. But having now read it, when I first read this, I had no thoughts. Like, MC is like, okay, sure. But I'm just going to say, I don't agree. Like, how are you going to blame the dad for, trying to be happy? Like, excuse me?
Yeah, 100%.
It's not making any sense.
Yeah.
It's 100%. I mean, I would say maybe it's his fault for spoiling Fëanor. Like, that's about as close as I could get, because clearly Fëanor has some
but it even said
he has some he's entitled, you can you know what I mean, and you can kind of see that from this, that he's very entitled and feels
he's the firstborn son
certain things
of the first king of the Noldor.
Mm-hmm. He's definitely very snobby and all of that, and so you could blame him for that just because it's okay, maybe you should have said no to the kid once in
but
a
also,
millennia.
How
I don't know
can
how old they are in this part.
Look at your kid whose mother died and not want to say yes to everything. Right. So I totally understand. So there's
but
for everybody in the history,
if you had just especially because even though he got remarried, he was clearly still favoring Fëanor. It's that's not really his fault.
Yeah,
it's not like he cast him to the side and was never mind, I got my
it's one thing for Fëanor and their fam or whatever to blame him, but I'm in all of history y'all are blaming this man. That's out of pocket. That's out of pocket.
Although it just occurred to me, it could be because Muriel told him, hold me blameless in this and all that may come after.
Ooh,
so maybe the reason that everyone blames Finwë is because maybe he went around and was maybe he started hearing rumors and was oh my god, if Muriel had never given birth to Fëanor, or if she had never chosen to die. And I can see him being and especially if he's the king, being or the of his specific sector of elves, whatever,
right?
Being no blasphemy against my first wife, or else off with your head. I
love that. That actually makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. I'm down with that headcanon.
So I can 100% him being if you want to blame someone, blame me, but don't blame Muriel because she had nothing she couldn't have known that this would happen.
Okay, shout out to Fingray.
I was gonna say it feels like a kind of like roundabout way to blame her.
Yeah,
like blaming her without really blaming her.
But like it comes down to whatever happens. Maybe I'll come back and eat my words. Whatever happens is Fëanor's doing, and all about owning up to our choices and actions.
So then,
okay, so moving on. Then, he does at least mention that the children of Indus, his half brothers Fingolfin and Finarfin, it says were great and glorious, and if they had not lived, the history of the Eldar would have been diminished. So even though Fëanor wasn't happy that they existed, the rest of the elves were. So none of that matters. Shifting gears a bit now to Melkor. He pops up again, and apparently it has been 3 ages since his captivity, which is so funny because it takes Tolkien 150 pages for the hobbits leave the Shire, but 3 ages pass in... Let's see, when was... That was 13 pages ago.
Yeah.
Like
he's
15...
He's packing a lot in this, honestly. Yeah. It's one of those where, like, there's a couple of these stories where I'm like, wait, could you just, like, can we stay here? What's happening here? And he's just like, nope, it's over.
Yeah, and moving on swiftly along. Yeah.
Exactly.
So... 3 ages pass, which means Melkor's sentence is up, and he can now plead for his innocence or, plead guilty, whatever. He just ultimate bullshire. Just like goes up and kneels before Manwe, and he looks around, and he is just like disgusted. He's like, I can't believe everyone's up here living their best life and I am not. How dare they? He especially hates the elves. He hates that they are up there in Valinor with the Valar. Also, he looks upon the wealth of bright gems and he lusted for them. But he hid his thoughts and postponed his vengeance, which I feel like I'm gonna tuck that phrase away of like, don't worry, I've postponed my vengeance. Love that.
I will say, like, with Melkor, like, obviously, he's clearly the baddie, right? Like, but he has, like, things like that. Like, he's very crafty and, like, petty in a way where, like, he's playing a long game, and I just,
I can appreciate it.
I admire
it's interesting.
The work ethic.
Yeah. Yeah, the work ethic.
I'm like, what
he's putting
doing?
in the work.
No.
I give it to him.
Yeah, but he's putting it in. He's committed, and he's like,
yeah, you gotta work hard to ball hard.
And I guess it makes sense, right? Because he's like, what is the word? Like eternal. You know what I mean? Like he's immortal. They're not going anywhere. So why does it need to happen right now? It doesn't. I can wait a couple 100 years. It's fine. But yeah, I appreciate the plotting.
Yeah. So he just puts on a show and is just like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. I swear I'm good now.
Promise.
Pinky promise.
He's like crossing his fingers.
Behind his back. Everyone is like, aw, bless your heart. However, it does say, but Mandos was silent. I love that.
Love it.
I mean, I think it goes back to, I know Delia was talking about it with just like in regards to the female characters, but there's like a lot of moments where Tolkien is like, this character didn't say anything. Like he makes a point to be like, but this character didn't say anything. And it's like, well, what were they thinking? What's going on over there?
Yeah. So Manwe is like, okay, you can go. I'm glad you learned your lesson.
Can you believe that he's the king of the Valar?
Like, I know. Oh my god! And it's so. So okay. So first they're like, okay. However, you did kind of like try to destroy the world. So we're not going to let you go to Middle Earth just yet. You're still going to be up here, I guess, like kind of on parole. and you're gonna be up here for a while. And then he was on his best behavior, so that's when they let him go and walk freely. And it seemed to Manwe that the evil of Melkor was cured.
Did it?
Yay. And it's because what did I rate? How did I not rate anything about I just put wow, the Valar are idiots.
That's all you needed to say.
That's
it's so true. How is Manwe the king? And it does say for Manwe was free from evil and could not comprehend it. And he knew that in the beginning, in the thought of Iluvatar, Melkor had been even as he. That's like looking at a murderer on trial and being like, yeah, but he was really cute when he was 5. Like, he wasn't a murderer then.
Right. It's like, yeah, sure, but then he did do the murder, so.
Yeah, so, like, he's a changed person. It's not like you're just gonna undo all that.
Right. And I think, too, like, it's not to say that Melkor needed to be, I mean, maybe Melkor did, like, need to be locked up forever, but, like, there's no, like, real follow-up. It's just, he seems to be okay now, but it's not like you're, like, even, like, he's, like, it's so easy for Melkor to just hide his thoughts and nobody's tripping. They're just like, okay, he looks fine, and it's just like, but
no follow-up plan? Y'all haven't been checking in on him? Like,
no nothing. Nobody's like
no probation
really.
officer doing like
nobody's
urine
like,
sample
what was he
tests
talking to you about?
Random drug testing.
So he's essentially they're just like, oh great, okay, you're done, and that's it.
Yeah.
And like hasn't been checking in up till now is how I take it, because it's Melkor is like angry to see all of them, like as if this is the first time he's seeing them. I have questions. They're not going to get answered because
how any of them could let you lock someone up for 3 ages. It just says ages. I don't know how long an age it is, but like that, I'm assuming it's a long time. It's got to be at least thousands of years, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can you not think like, oh, I wonder if he's gonna be angry with us? Like,
he's like, especially because it's not like he got like any kind of like, he still thinks what he was doing was right. Like he was out here trying to create the remix, and y'all were, not about that. And so he's mad. He wants to like be the producer. He wants to be lead producer on this album, and y'all aren't letting him.
And so he's created his own production company, and he's trying to get everybody on the label that he can. So, and like the fact that they didn't like what you said, he's clearly gonna be mad, but it really seems like Manwe's like, yeah, we're cool though, right? And Melkor's clearly on his face like, no, but yeah, sure, we're cool.
Meanwhile, like, Manwe's at the top of like his hit list that he's like writing in his journal, like first page in his burn book. Like,
also want to shout out to Olmo, who was not deceived, and Tulkas, who clinched his hand. Like,
love that.
Love them.
They're like, no, there's still smoke here. I don't.
I love Tulkas is like quickly become my favorite. Where he's just ready to throw hands no matter what.
At any point.
But like for good,
Mm-hmm.
It's got like a good energy to it.
And that's why I'm so mad that Manwe is king, because like the only reason Tulkas is not throwing hands is out of respect for Manwe. I'm like, let's make this a democracy. How about that? Like,
Olmo should really be the one in power, because
I'm into it.
In a previous chapter, it mentioned something that like Olmo knew all that was going on because the waters run through Arda like veins in the body, and so like he's tapped into everything and he knows what's going on. Like, let's have Olmo be the leader, not Manwe, who's in such a totally different part of the world. Like, it doesn't even know, like, they didn't even know that the elves had been born yet until
he's completely written off like all of the Valar, but it's his fault. Like, they've completely written off Middle Earth.
Yeah.
But like that was y'all's job. You had one job, and
they
then
messed it up.
Melkor messed it up, and you said, oops, I guess we're done, and like went off into this like
us humans that were messing up the planet Earth, and we're like, well, hopefully we can colonize Mars.
That's exactly what it's like
for this place.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh.
And there's a few humanitarians are like, but we should maybe try and fix Earth. And then like the billionaires are like, nah.
Nah.
Yeah. So, man, good. I just love Tolkas. Let me read it. For if Tolkas is slow to wrath, he is slow also to forget.
Mm-hmm. He's that one.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, Melkor hates the Eldar, hates everything that's happened because they were responsible for his downfall. So he works extra hard, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So he works extra hard to earn their love and friendship, and he starts learning of them. However, the Vanyar held him in suspicion. And the Teleri gave him small heed, thinking them of little worth, tools too weak for his designs. Wait, what? To the Teleri he gave... Okay, then never mind. Sorry. I thought that was the Teleri thinking that Melkor was weak. Anyway. So, yeah, the Vanyar weren't you, in jail?
Did they give you a full pardon, or is it just parole? I'm confused.
I'm unsure.
I'm not sure about that. And then he totally writes the Teleri off, but the Noldor, he takes delight in the hidden knowledge that he could reveal to them. So he spends years getting close to them, learning from them, in turn teaching them things, and he becomes close in particular to Fëanor. However, Fëanor is also pulling the same thing that Melkor is pulling, because he hates Melkor. For none of the Eldalie ever hated Melkor more than Fëanor, son of Finwë, who first named him Morgoth. I think in a different world, Melkor and Fëanor would have been enemies to lovers.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it's giving.
You know what? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%.
I hate you so much that I have to spend all my time with you.
And I did just binge watch Bridgerton season 2 last week, which is this exact plot essentially of oh my god, I can't stand you, but we have to be with each other or whatever. But the way that they both hate each other so much that they are both pretending to like each other to get close to the other person. It ends like this. It says, for Fëanor was driven by the fire of his own heart only, working ever swiftly and alone. And he asked the aid and sought the counsel of none that dwelt in Aman, great or small. This to Tolkien's credit, save only to Tolkien's discredit, and for a little while. Of Nerdanel, the wise, his wife. So she's the only one that he goes to. Cool, yay! But it's only for a little bit. So not that great. And that's the end of the chapter. Is Fëanor we're leading up to Fëanor and Melkor both being crafty,
or possibly a whirlwind romance. Who's to say?
Yeah.
We'll see next
Bridgerton
chapter.
season 3. I think, man, I can't wait to piss the people on Twitter off about that one.
Ooh, I'm excited. We'll retweet excitedly.
Fëanor and Melkor 100% would have been enemies to lovers. Oh my god, Tolkien just was not brave enough.
It's all right.
He just wasn't. He was like, the world's not ready. I'm not ready. So we talked for a while about 4 pages, but was there anything else that you guys wanted to bring up or scream about, since you were let us come on and scream about things?
The main thing about how is Manwe king, we got out and got it out into the open, and I feel good about that.
Yeah, that was really that was when we were we have to
have to
trash Manwe because he's horrible. We in our community were likening him to Michael Scott from The Office.
You know what? I don't know what specifically it was that I was reading, but there was something that I was I'm getting Office Michael Scott incompetent boss vibes.
He's so useless.
Yeah.
And it's but you're arguably the most powerful dude out here, and you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
You're giving nothing.
But surrounded by more competent people. like Michael Scott. And loves a good party. So
yes, yeah, all true things. Well, that will bring us to the end of the episode. Thank you both for coming on. Where can people find you on the internet?
So you can find Black Girls Create, which is a hub for Black creators and critical fandom, at blackgirlscreate.org, on Twitter at BLKGirlsCreate, and on Instagram at BlackGirlsCreate. I'm on Twitter at Yana, YANA, wrote it, as in like write in past tense. Yeah.
And you can find me in those same places, but also on Twitter at Delia is typing. That's DELIA is typing.
Cool. I don't know why my brain, for some reason, was waiting for you to say .com. I don't know why.
I just remembered, we also soon, we kind of talked about it up top, but we did have, back in 2019, a Patreon-only podcast called Tolkien Black Girls. Ha ha ha. But we are releasing that to the public soon, so it's dated.
Yay!
We hadn't read the Silmarillion at that point, but it's still, I think it'll be fun. It'll still be a laugh. And that's in, what is it, June? July? Content calendar manager? June. We haven't officially announced it on Twitter, so y'all are the first to hear outside of our community, so that's exciting.
Yay!
Yeah.
No, that's super exciting. Yay! Mostly just because I mean, obviously, given the name of my podcast, I appreciate like a good pun. So like, I'm just glad that like that's going to be out into the like public world now.
Tolkien Black Girls. Check it out. June. Follow us on Black Girl, like on Twitter or wherever you be following, and you can stay up to date when that's dropping.
That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WB&E. If you want to learn more about the network, go to WB&E.org, where you will find all of our shows, like Curly Critics. The cover art is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/TolkienAboutPod. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod. You can follow me on Twitter at MCWhatsup and Instagram at MCTurndownForWhat. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod to explore the different tiers and perks that are available. A reminder that I recently just did a refresh that included a few more perks. If you want some bonus content, such as a post-show conversation sort of that I had with Delia and Bayana, you can access that by becoming a member of the 11Z's tier, or you can become a sponsor of the podcast like Irina. Irina, thank you so much for supporting me, and That's What I'm Talking About. That is a really wonderful thing that you have chosen to do with your one and precious life, and I so much appreciate that. As always, if you like what you're listening to, please rate and review. All that being said, do you have any parting words for the audience?
You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Stay ready, and stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Period.
And that's what I'm talking about.